Where's your book?
I have
Or a copy? Is it? Shoulders not here?
He was here. I don't know where he's the Huh?
I'm going to check maybe. Oh, it's on already. Sorry. Thought it, let's see. Thought it wasn't on yet.
I don't know.
Okay. We are on the beginning of the line. Up. Yeah. Yeah. V'yeshlema ha'moshel bozeh.
What side is this?
On page Dalit, right? And it's about 1/3 down the page, and it starts with the Lashon Tevis V'yeshlema Vov Yud Lamed. That's where we're at. So we finished explaining this one point, that the creation, in order to facilitate the creation, there had to be a total bringing the light to total oblivion, hiding completely the godly light. And then subsequently there was the creation. And the reason this had to be hidden is because the world cannot have a place, cannot be created as long as there is this godly light revealed. But then yet, we say that the ultimate purpose of this tzimtzum and the creation is that this same godly light that couldn't be together with the world should subsequently be revealed in the world and should be accepted in the world. And he explained from the Arizal that even though beforehand the world weren't able to accept it and to receive it. After they were there, they were able to receive it. We discussed various illustrations, various explanations for this, and now the Rebbe gives a moshel for this. V'yesh loymar ha-moshel b'zeh. A moshel for this could be as follows. Something that would illustrate a similar phenomenon. And from this we'll understand how it happens in the creation. K'moi behashpo az haseichel mehorav l'talmud. Just as what takes place when the Rav is mashpia, teaches a seichel to the Talmud. So now that we have to understand this phenomenon of a Rav being mashpia, a seichel to the Talmud. Because when we first think of it, we kind of imagine, why would a Rav need to be mashpia? Why can't the Talmud learn it on his own? So we would think because the seichel is so complicated, he wouldn't be able to sort things out, and the Rav helps him to sort things out. If that were the case, then it's not that the Rav is mashpia seichel. The Rav is guiding him how to approach and how to learn a certain thing in an orderly and organized way, so that he won't get lost in it. The term, the words, hashpoas horav, hashpoas haseichel, mehorav letalmid, means that the Rav is mashpia of his seichel, something that is not available to the Talmud at all. The Talmud will just not, it will not find it anyplace else, except in the Rav's mind. What does this mean? What kind of seichel is this? So in order to be able to relate to this whole concept, which we must, in order to understand this whole moshel, you have to understand firstly what is meant by the word seichel, which we discussed in the general class a little while ago. The general meaning of seichel, seichel amushi. And we clearly said then that seichel does not mean just the complication of things, just to figure things out. Seichel refers to a level of perception that exists only in seichel. When you sort things out, the object that you are sorting exists outside of the seichel, and you are applying seichel to sort them out and put them into some kind of a order. But the objects themselves are real objects that you can see, touch, feel, measure. This is not what's referred to when you say hashpoas haseichel mehorav latal. Hashpoas haseichel means he actually gives him of his seichel, which means that the whole concept, the whole perception of the inyan is a seichel perception. It doesn't exist outside of the seichel. Like we illustrated then on a simple level, that when you perceive the world with your eyes, perceive the world with your other senses, you perceive the world from a perspective of personal interest, then you see the metzius of the world, the way the world presents itself to you. If you see, for instance, if you see a table, it depends. If the table is in your way, you want to go from point A to point B, and the table is in your way, then you look at the table as an abstraction, as something that interferes with your walk. It's just a piece of material that interferes with your walk. It has no significance whatsoever on its own. If you're looking for a place where you can sit down and put a book down, then you see it as a table. It all depends on how you're going to use the object, what it means. Seichel provides an entirely different perspective on things. The first thing that Seichel asks, the first step in Seichel is, where did this come from? And what is its purpose here? Like we illustrated, if you go into a furniture store and you see a whole bunch of tables, those tables do not serve as tables at that time. Those tables are only potentially tables. When people look at them, they project, what would this table look like in my dining room? And when it's put in the dining room, then it becomes part of the dining room and it becomes a dining room table. But the table per se, by itself, is just 4 legs and a board. You can do anything you want with it. And you can look at it as 4 legs and a board to break down and throw into your furnace. As a matter of fact, like you said, the Seichel Bahami Abhema, in fact, sees it that way. Doesn't see it in any broader and a bigger perspective. Therefore, Seichel is, say Hashpoz, Haseichel means not how to measure the table, how much it weighs, but what is the meaning of what you see? And what is its purpose? How are you supposed to relate to these things? Which is entirely a human concept. Doesn't exist outside of the human world. So now, when you begin to teach a child human values, you teach a child gradually to respect property, to respect his own property, to teach him how to care for it, and then the child begins to appreciate that objects are not just disposable object, but there is value to it. There is human value. And he begins to store away, to hide certain valuables because they are valuable in themselves, not only because he can use them. There is a story of the Rebbe by his Obshernish. By the Obshernish, you know what Obshernish means, at age 3 you cut the hair of a child. And that is also the time when they inaugurate, when they first bring the child into Cheder. So at this, it's customary, at this entrance into the Cheder, that day is a very special day by the child. They cover him with a talus, bring him into the Cheder, that he shouldn't see any dog of Tomei. And then in the Cheder, the Rebbe shows the child certain letters of the Aleph base, or some do, whatever. And every time that the child repeats after the Rebbe says, say an Aleph, and says an Aleph, they throw candies down. They throw candies to the child. And the message is that your learning should be as sweet to you as candies. And the child gets a certain sense that learning is going to be a sweet thing. But then there's also a meaning that when they throw down the candies, they tell the child that it's Malach Michael who is throwing the candies to you. Malach Michael. So when the Rebbe heard that these are candies that come directly from Malach Michael, so he gathered the candies and put them away, and he wouldn't eat them. How can I eat candies from Malach Michael? It's too dear for me to eat them. and he hid them. But then came before Pesach, so his father called him over and said, "Where are the candies that Malach Michael gave you?" So then they said, "Now is the time you must eat them because Pesach you can't have them." So then he was kind of pressured into eating them. What is this to illustrate? To a child, a candy is very dear. Why? Because it's sweet and it tastes good. But a candy that tastes good and is given to you by Malach Michael is so dear that you don't want to touch it. You don't want to eat it. You want to save it. What is the meaning of saving? Saving means that there is a value to it beyond the experience. There's a value to it that is entirely a seichel value. The palate doesn't feel it. The behemoth in the person doesn't feel it, can't relate to it. It's a seichel. The seichel defines its value. Entirely created by the seichel. This is the basic meaning of the word seichel. So when we say that is mashpia, a Rav is mashpia seichel, that means that is mashpia such a perception, a concept, such an insight, such a value that does not currently exist in the Talmud's world. They're clearly madreges bli gvul, and this hashpoah is such that the Talmud cannot relate to it. Doesn't exist in his world. So therefore, if it doesn't exist in his world, how are you going to teach it to him? He doesn't have any means by which to relate to it and by which to learn it. So for this, there's a whole special process, approach, how the Rav has to prepare and present the seichel, so that the Talmud will both learn the seichel and absorb it, and eventually grow to the point where the seichel will become a natural and a true a perception for him. He will actually perceive that which the Rav perceives, and will have the similar value to it as the Rav. This is the meaning of hashpoah. Hashpoah is seichel me'arav. And this is why it's so valuable, because hashpoah from seichel to the Rav is not just providing him information, but actually serves to uplift the Talmud, to open up his seichel, open up his neshama, so that he begins to perceive and relate to ideas, to things that without this hashpoah he would never have. So this is what the moshel is. Behashpoas haseichel me'orav l'talmud. In this process of hashpia seichel from Rav l'talmud, harei. So there, the situation is like this: Im hoyo mashpia lei bitchila. If he would be mashpia to him right in the start, oimek pnimius chochmosei, the depth of the deeper insight of his chochmah. What is the pshat, the deeper insight of the chochmah? Pnimis chochmosei means not only the chochmah as it manifests, as it expresses itself in practice. Like we said, a child has to know that there are certain things that are valuable, not only when you play with them and you can buy something with them, but even if you put them away in the closet, they're also valuable. They're valuable in themselves, in and of themselves. So at first, just to give you a general illustration, at first you teach a child that if you save this, then later on you'll be able to accumulate more. And when you accumulate it, then, let's say if a child gets paid for Chazan and Mishnayos, and the child has a nickel for Mishnayos, he runs right away and buys a candy. But if you teach the child and say, listen, you got a nickel, save the nickel. The next time you have another mission, you get another nickel. And then, when you accumulate enough nickels, you'll be able to buy your own seed. So that's a way that the child begins to appreciate what it means that you can put things away and they're still valuable to you. In other words, the value of things is not measured by immediate use. But even if the use comes later, it's also valuable. With this illustration, the child can then be taught that there are things that are valuable even if they're not meant for use at all, not meant to have. When the Rebbe gives you $1, you don't accumulate the dollar to spend it eventually. You save the dollar because just saving the dollar itself is also valuable. But in order to appreciate that, you first have to have a step up from there. If a child only knows that what's valuable, that which I can taste, so how can you tell him save the dollar? What does it mean I have $1 if I can't use it? So there's a graduality to it, by which he gets to learn higher and higher and higher. Now, excuse me, this is all in a practical level. What is the oimek pnimius chochmos? Oimek pnimius chochmos, let's say in this simple context simple illustration that we are talking about, is the simple concept to say, the father comes to the child, a 3-year-old child, and says to him, you should know there are things that have intrinsic value. What are you talking about? How can things have intrinsic value? They're valuable only if you use them. You can't give it to him right away, the real background and real full meaning of what this is all about. You first have to train him on the practical level, on the chitzonis, show him the chitzonis how this can happen. Then you uplift higher and higher until he gets to the idea, there are things that have intrinsic value, that are totally not measured by their practical use. So this is what he says. If the Rav, if right to start, he would give him oimet pnimius chochmosoi, the pnimius of his chochmah, harei lo hoyo efsher lekabel. It would not be possible for him to receive the chochmah. What would happen if he cannot receive the chochmah? When the Rav is mashpia, a chochmah, and the Talmud cannot receive it, he is mashpia to him more than he can receive. He can relate to it. So then one of two things can happen. Either the Talmud goes away from the Rav, says, I don't know what you're talking about. You don't know what you're talking about. You're someplace else, you're dreaming. It's unreal. Or if the Talmud forces himself and wants to grab it, the Talmud goes off his mind. Because he can relate to it. He himself begins to live in a fantasy world. Because it's not real to him. It doesn't exist in his world. This is called Shviras HaKelim. Not Shviras HaKelim, you heard the word Shviras HaKelim. The Kelim are broken. There's no more Kelim. Now he's taking the thing just the way it is, without any Kelim. So therefore, this is definitely not an advisable thing to do. If the Rav really wants to be mashpiyah, that's not the method to employ. Except, what then does he have to do? L'tzorich. He must do the following. La'ashpiyah loi oir metzumtzom shalefi erkoi. He has to first be mashpiyah to him a limited oir, a limited perception. Shalefi erkoi, that is exactly measured according to his measure. That he can actually relate. And this is the big greatness, the tremendous greatness that exists in Seichel. That even though the Talmud never heard of a Seichel like this, but you can always expand on it. The next step, that is both, it's a little further than what I was before. It's not the whole Seichel, but it simulates a new view, a new approach. Yeah, well, just like I'll illustrate this in the Fiatko, like in the muscle that I gave, right? That in order to get the child to understand that things have a value, an intrinsic value, first you have to show him that things have a value, even if they are not for immediate use. How do you show it to him? You have to show it to him lefi erkoi. Think lefi erkoi. Lefi erkoi is like this. On the one hand, he appreciates only that which he can immediately use. And yet you want to teach him that there's a value beyond immediate use. So you correlate. You say, if you save it, you can have a bigger use. So you still translate it in terms of use. But not immediate, a delayed use. So therefore he's teaching it to him by using that which he does appreciate, which is the concept of use. But you are giving him a new perception, that there is a use that comes from after delay. What is your real purpose? What do you really have in mind? Not that he should have the greater use. You're trying to teach him the concept of delay, a totally different thing. You're not trying to teach him that he would accumulate and he will have a bigger use. You're trying to teach him a completely different thing. You're trying to teach him that there's a value in things just by putting them away. Don't use them at all. But how can you come to him and do it? So you tell him, put it away, and then you have it. And in the meantime, he sees a value. He learns how to put things away. And then you can start teaching him that even to have it is also valuable, even if he never uses it. This is the pshat that you teach it to him mitzumtzom oir mitzumtzom lefi arkoi, in a way that he can relate to it, he can take it. After that, the Talmud accepts this oir hamtzumtzum, this limited instruction, limited illumination, limited light. The nitvas, and it's grasped. Nitvas means grasped. The niklat means it's absorbed. There are two steps in receiving seichel. First, nitvas means he fully understands it. After that, he fully understands it. Then niklat, it becomes absorbed, means it becomes part of his seichel. He actually can personally relate to the seichel. Besichel in his seichel. Hine achar kach. And afterwards, harei hu bo, then the Talmud will actually come, meaning he will actually reach, and he will actually be able to perceive Al oimek pnimius seichel harav. You'll actually be able to perceive the depth of the seichel harav. Why would he? How will he get to the oimek pnimius seichel harav? The one principle that we have to remember the whole time is that the Talmud has a koyach haseichel. He has a koyach haseichel in his nefesh. And his nefesh is definitely capable to relate to the deepest seichel, to the deepest concepts. From the perspective of his nefesh, he can relate to the deepest in them. Except that now it hasn't developed yet. Now in the goof, in how he perceives things now to the goof, he doesn't have this concept. So the process is to open up his seichel more and more, so that the light of seichel that exists in his nefesh will permeate, will surface, and he will begin to think with his own seichel, but at a higher level, at a more spiritual level, at a more seichelic level. He will begin to realize in his own mind. His nefesh always knew it, but now in his mind he'll be able to see, hey, there are true values. Forget about what things look like. There are real values. And that's what I should be pursuing. Not what things look like and what how I measure up with other people. What is true values? That capacity he absolutely has. If he did not have that capacity, then you can talk and talk and talk and use all kinds of gimmicks, and it will never go through. This is what we explained in the other lesson, that if you can teach a cat, lahavdil, to serve at a feast, and the cat will never understand what it's doing. It will never appreciate that it's serving at a feast. It doesn't know what a feast is. Because that he has this seichel, the function of the Rav is to open this seichel, to bring it out. And that's why, ultimately, Harehu bo alemek pnimius seichel harav. He actually reaches that pnimius seichel harav. He can actually perceive it and see it. Shezehu. This is in parentheses, a quote from the Gemara. The Gemara says, Shezehu ma. This is what the Gemara means when it says, the koyim adaite de rabbi. That at certain point, koyim adaite de rabbi, a Talmud stands, meaning he reaches to understand the full mind, the full intent of his Rebbe. The Gemara says that after 40 years, the Talmud is able to reach and comprehend the full mind of his Rebbe, of what the Rizaf taught him. But that takes 40 years. But then his seichel opens up and he actually is able to perceive it. Because he has it inherently. And not only is he able to see it, but to be cholte lekabel. And now he is able to accept it. And it doesn't disturb him at all. Because now his own seichel, his whole perception of the world is not what it was when he first started out. He has a totally different sense of values, a totally different perception of what life and world is. I mean, in our example is this. We're talking about Madam Lod, and his seichels, the deeper seichels, seichel HaTorah and seichel Chassidus. V'tzorich leimer, we must say, the zehu gam kein, that this happens, that the fact that the Talmud is able to now accept the seichel. So the way we illustrated the whole time is in our illustration we used only the illustration of the seichel developing. It's like learning A and learning step one and then step B. To be able to go from one level of a concept to the next level of concept, so that he will actually be able to relate and understand what this is. The Rebbe says that this is not the only thing that happens. There's another thing that happens here. The fact that his skeli is able to accept it, there's another phenomenon here also. The zehu gamkin, that it also is because mitzad tikun hakeli. Because the keli was also nistakim, was also purified and perfected. In seichel, there are two phenomena. There is the seichel, and there is the brain, the moyach. Seichel per se is a koyach hanefesh. Sometimes comes from the nefesh. But how does one actually aware of the seichel? We are not capable of being aware of anything in the nefesh except that level which the guf is sensitive to. That which the guf is not sensitive to, it may be true in the nefesh, and we are totally unaware of it. There's no way that we can relate to it and perceive. We have to go everything through our guf. So in this process of the Rav being mashpia to the Talmid, there are two things that are happening simultaneously. One meaning is that the Rav opens up the mind of the Talmid so that he sees a different seichel that he saw before. He perceives things differently. But then in order to receive it, to be able to accept it, the moyach has to become more sensitive and more capable of relating to it. The physical moyach. And this is what he says, that there is also this phenomenon, that mitzat tikun hakeli, because the keli is also becoming more perfected. How does this mean? Dalidei shenitfas boy haseichel. As a result of the fact that in this moyach, he didn't mention moyach, he mentioned the Talmud. We'll see in a minute moyach. That dalidei shenitfas boy haseichel, as a result of the fact that in this Talmud was able to grasp this seichel, mistaken u'mizdachech hakli moyach shaloi. Mistaken means is perfected, u'mizdachech means is purified. The keli of his moyach. The moyach has its own limitations. And the first limit of moyach, even though the moyach is the most sensitive part in the person. This is where the neshama first rests. This is sensitive to life itself. Still, the moyach is a gashmi. In the realm of gashmis, it's the most sensitive. There is nothing that passes the moyach that moyach does not sense. But still, it's gashmi. And because it's gashmi, in order for the moyach to be able to accept any concept, that concept has to be put in some form that simulates gashmi. What means simulates gashmi? A dover gashmi, what is the parameters of gashmi is? Number one, it takes up room. it's mokim uzman. It takes up room and it has time for its existence. It exists in a certain place and a certain time. And the moyach you cannot relate to the moyach anything that does not have a place in Gashmias. That's a concept, totally neutral concept, that has nothing to do with that cannot be expressed in some kind of a form that denotes space and time. There's no way that the moyach can relate to it. But in this level itself, in this Gashmis itself, that itself can be purified, and he can relate, and the moyach can be relating to much more refined sense of Gashmis. Let me illustrate this. When we first say one thing is bigger or higher than the other, what is the first thought that one has? Measure it. This is bigger than this. It's higher than this. When you say something is first, and then something is later, how does it relate to? Something came here. I came here first. You came here later. So it relates to it in simple terms of mokim and zman. Then you say that the same concept of first and second, primer, and first and second can be translated also at a different level. And the level is primary and secondary. You know what primary means? Primary and secondary. We use the same term, but we mean something else. Why do we use the same term? Because these are the only terms that the moyach can relate to. Something is first, something is second. But here we mean something else already. And we were able to put things in perspective in the moyach in a different way. That there is something that first and second does not mean necessarily first and second in terms of time, but it means something that is first in terms of its value, and something that is second in terms of its value. We still have to use the same terminology. We cannot avoid using terminology that is measurable, that can be expressed, that is expressible in worldly terms, namely space and time. But then, the more he understands, the more refined the concept of space and time becomes. It's no longer space and time in a concrete way. It becomes more conceptual. It becomes more conceptual. Like we say, primary and secondary rather than first and second. And the same thing when you say bigger and smaller, we do not necessarily mean bigger in terms of measurable space, but it means bigger in terms of its value. And yet we use the same terminology, because the terminology cannot deviate from it, because the only way that you can relate to the moyach is in physical terms. This is what the Rebbe says, that the moyach itself becomes mizdachech, becomes purified. So that now, klei ha-moyach sheli, the kelim itself, you can speak, after a while you can speak to him in conceptual terms, and you won't begin to measure it. he'll understand what you're saying. He'll take the terms that you use, first and second, and he'll know that you don't mean first and second in terms of time, but you mean in terms of its value. And it won't be a problem at all. He won't be confused. He won't have to retranslate it because he thinks to begin with this way. Because his moichin has become more refined. Ukiyodua, and as is well known, the behashpoas horav letalmid, that in the process of the Rav being mashpia to his Talmud, not just telling him about information, but actually being mashpia, meaning that he's actually opening up the seichel of the Talmud in mashpia, his seichel to him. Then harei hashpo. So then, when there is a lot of hashpo, nasim chushe haTalmid k'moi chushe harav. The chushim of the Talmud approximate, they become similar to the chushim of the Rav. The senses, the chushim, the ideas, the way of thought of the Talmud becomes similar to the chushim of the Rav. Because the seichel of the Rav was absorbed by the Talmud, and it actually formed his brain. It formed his means of perception. His means of relating to things. Yeah. So this is the motion. This is the motion for the inyan that we want. Huh? The motion of the inyan hatzitz. And the important point of the motion is the end of it. That even though before the hashpoah the Talmud was not able to understand it, was not able to relate to it, and he wasn't able to receive it. And as we said before, if he would make an effort to receive it, then it would have one of two consequences, which are both negative. But then it doesn't mean that ultimately he will not be able to receive it. He will be able to receive it because his seichel will open up, and his chushim, his koyach, his moyach will also become refined and be able to and be a receptacle for finer things.
Why is it conceptually is divided into two, just the seichel and the moyach? I'm not talking about instrument. I'm talking about in a moshel, an example, when you say that Rov teaching mashpia seichel to the Talmud, so you say that both things are happening.
Right.
So why do you? It's impossible to make a separation between them, right? Because exactly two things are supposed to happen. It cannot be one without another. It's the Talmud starts developing his seichel, and his moyach developed by it also. It comes together, right? It's like
it comes together, but it's true. But the reason that there's an emphasis is for us to understand that if the Rav explains the Talmud, this is a phenomenon that we all experience. A Rav explains something to the Talmud, and the Talmud understands it fully well. And then the shir is over. Now the Talmud goes to his own and tries to explain it to himself, and he's a total blank. He lost it. How did he lose it? It's not because of his memory, but he fully understood it before. If he understood before, that means that he had the seichel. So how did he lose it now? He lost it now is because his brain was not yet worked out that he should actually be able to retain the seichel. This is what happens in repetition, in Hazorah. When you work it in, there are two things. He stoifes the seichel, he grasps the seichel, and again and again and again, until it actually makes an imprint. on his brain, and then he doesn't lose it that easily. He doesn't, because he now can actually personally relate to it. His brain, yeah.
So the question is, how is possible then, if he can, you're saying that the moyer is a gashmi, and if the Talmud is already able to perceive the seichel, which is high seichel, let's say, and meaning that his moyer he can relate to it with his moyer, right?
Yeah.
In this Zmanu Mokim, there is a place to put it in. It's refined enough, I'm saying, right? And then somehow he forgets it.
Yeah, because he hasn't yet really, he wasn't really teufus it yet. This is similar when the Rav is teaching. This is similar like the relationship between Chochmah and Bina. You learn about Chochmah and Bina. Chochmah is also an understanding, level of understanding. But that level of understanding is not really understanding, it's just having a sighting of something.
Mm-hmm.
When you have a sighting of something, he didn't really grasp it. You saw it, it's clear, and yet it wasn't grasped with your chushim. The grasping of the chushim, this is where hard work comes in. Because to bring the seichel out of the nefesh, out of the seichel, is an easier step than to work it into the brain, into the gashmi.
But that's a way how to do it. By grasping things and do it again and again and again. That's right. How Moed
That's right. How Moed grows.
Eventually.
There is also a simple illustration of this phenomenon. You have here a weightlifting room.
Mm-hmm.
Anybody, a healthy person, can lift a certain weight. He lifts it up once and finished. He drops it. Why you drop it? You were able to lift it a moment ago. Why can't you lift it now? Because your koiches are not, your hand, your muscles are not really fit for it. You can garner all your koiches, and then you can have to lift it because you are healthy and strong. But in order to be able to do it a second time, for that you have to train the muscle. And the training of the muscle, this is where all the effort is. It's not just to lift it once. The effort is all in bringing your whole physique to that level. And the similar Indian is in Ruchnius. To grasp it once is, you have to pay attention, you have to concentrate, but then you can grasp it. But to retain it and to be able to relate to it, that's a very work. That's a very labor.
Is it also true that if you're gonna, let's say, practice more with your moyer, then next time you will be able to perceive, to grasp more profound idea, which you wouldn't be able to grasp before?
Sure.
Sure. Is also true?
Of course. That's how it grows.
Okay.
That's how it grows. The more one learns, especially from a Rav, who gives him a deeper insight, and then he is able to go further.
And he trains and he's able to grasp something that he wasn't able to even to grasp before.
That's right.
Right?
Sure. Ubedugma kozois, in similar fashion, Yuvon, in a similar way, Yuvon, we will be able to understand how the Inyonim are in the creation. The leyachar shenizhavu ha'oilams, that after that the worlds were created, umeir bohem oir hakav, and in the world there is the oir hakav, which is the godly light from the kav, which means that there is a godly perception in the world. Not the way it was before the Tzimtzum, but still there's an opening to the real thing. It's like a window to the real thing. V'yodua gamkein, and we also know, this is the second Inyan, the ha'oir pnimi, that the oir pnimi, the oir of the kav, that's called pnimi, that pnimi means that it actually becomes part of the world. Mitzachtzeyach chotzi hakeli mibafnim. Mitzachtzeyach. It cleans up, it purifies the inside of the keli. The ha'oir makiv, and then there is ha'oir makiv, that is mitzachtzeyach chotzi hakeli mibachutz. That cleans it from outside. We'll be able to talk about it another time. And thus, yicholim achar kach lekabel, thus the worlds are afterwards, subsequently, are able to receive gam bechinas klolus ha'oir. They're able to receive bechinas klolus ha'oir. Bechinas klolus ha'oir means, let me first translate the words. The klolus ha'oir means the light at a general level, shelamayla megilui hakav, that is higher than the gilui hakav. The concept bechinas klolus ha'oir is the same as we had in our illustration with the Rav and Talmud. That when you're teaching the child to delay and put things away. These are all things, every step of the way you are teaching him little bits and pieces, and you're relating it back to some kind of a practical result. But what is the essential concept that you want to transmit to the child? The essential concept that you want eventually to transmit to the child is not how it is enacted practically, but the very essence of the concept that there is an essential value to things, an intrinsic value to things. This concept that there is an intrinsic value to things, this is similar to the concept of klolus ha'oir. In other words, you're saying there is intrinsic value to things, and it is not translated on a practical level. This includes all kinds of things. And not only it includes all kinds of things, no matter what you include in it, it itself is much higher than anything it includes. It's an essential concept. It's a different type of oir. It's an oir that does not translate completely in anything practical. Which means that this is a concept that it does not come from a practical level. Let me explain to you the union in this. When you tell the child, put away your nickel, and put another nickel, and so forth, and accumulate it, so that when you accumulate it, you'll be able to buy a bigger thing. How are you teaching this to a child? The child knows what it means to buy. The child knows what it means to taste. From this perception, from this understanding, what it means to buy, you're teaching him what is a better way to buy. The better way to buy is not to spend your nickel, but to accumulate them. So essentially, you're teaching him the value of accumulation from a perception of how to buy, not with the value of accumulation per se, but how it serves better the purpose of buying. So that means that this whole concept is learned from coming down, from down up. He learns it because he understands what it means to buy, and this teaching him what is a better way to buy. So he's going upwards. When you come to Klolus O'er, which is L'mayla Mihatzimtzum, means that you're not teaching him something that is not related to the practical aspect. And it doesn't come from the practical benefit. He's not learning it from bottom up. He's learning it from top down. He's learning the concept itself, as it is unrelated to the practice, to the practical. Which means, that's what it says, that is higher than Gilui Akav, which means the concept as it is in itself true, not true because it is true on the practical level. You get the point?
It's very hard. What's the point of having something that doesn't have a practical value? I understand what you want to teach to the child. You want to teach to the child something of intrinsic value, which is
something has intrinsic value.
So what's the point to say to having practical value is not right? It's right. What's right is to have intrinsic value. That's what we're trying to. But you cannot relate. So you're bringing him.
No, that's not what's not right. This is a deeper union. You're teaching him that there's such a thing as intrinsic value.
Right.
But you come to it by relating it to a practical. But then ultimately you come to the level where you are dissociating it completely from the practical. So now he gets the concept from its source rather than from building up bottom up.
It's understandable. That's the idea itself. Why would be such a difference between the practical and intrinsic? So same thing in the nimshal of the clothes of.
If you have an intrinsic value, it has no practical value at all.
Right.
What does it mean?
So why do we need the practical value then, if there is intrinsic value?
Because that's the only way the child
can
understand to start with. A value of anything.
Mm-hmm.
That the Rebbe explains in the minor of Yud Shvat, that there is oitzvus, there are treasures that the king has stored away that nobody ever sees. What's the value of treasures that nobody ever sees? The whole thing is that the king, like a Hashverosh, he wanted to show his wealth. But if you don't show it, what's the point? What does it mean? And yet the Rebbe explains that these treasures are precisely what gives the full strength and the depth of this malchus. It's never going to be used for anything. It's meant to stay there in the treasure house, never to see the light of day. And that gives the basis, the full basis and strength of the malchus. This?
The square.
This is it, right?